Considering interning at a startup? Watch this video before clicking apply. Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is April Lynn. I'm a recovering banker turned founder. In this channel, we explore the trials and tribulations, successes and strategies to growing a profitable online business and growing your audience. Today, I'll reveal exactly how I got into entrepreneurship in the first place, interning at a startup. In this video, I'll be sharing my own experience interning at a startup and share some of the pros and cons of interning at a startup, including some things that most people don't talk about. Let's get to it. But first I want to talk about how I got an internship at a startup in the first place, because actually during my earlier years in college, I was not interested in entrepreneurship whatsoever. So when I was a sophomore in college, I was looking for an internship for my upcoming summer. And the thing is that I actually knew that I had an internship in the following summer, so summer of my junior year, because banks recruit super early. So I knew I had an internship at a bank my junior summer, but I still didn't have anything for my sophomore summer. Anyways, I was applying online to a variety of different, banking, finance, real estate internships. But what I found was that a lot of the bigger companies were only looking for third-year interns, and I was only in my second year. So at that point, I was a little desperate to find an internship for the upcoming summer, so I did something that I had never done before. I went to a career fair. Now, despite my, outwardly friendly and outgoing demeanor, I'm actually quite of an introvert. Being around a lot of people is an activity that just takes up a lot of my energy. Remind me again why I'm building a social media presence. Anyway, there's a reason why I hadn't been to a career fair before. There were a lot of people there. Students were wearing suits that are way too big for them. The air smells like BO. There are lost resumes on the floor. It's really hot and muggy. Need I go on? But here I am. So I go into this career fair, and obviously I'm, immediately overwhelmed. So I kind of go into this corner where there's this one table that doesn't really have a long line to get to the rep. And it's a bare table. There's no table skirt. It's just a laptop, bare table, rep. Super basic. So it turns out that this rep was from a Series A venture-backed startup based in Silicon Valley. I was always interested in startups, even though I had never thought about doing one myself or being an entrepreneur. The concept really intrigued me, and I thought that it would be a really good different experience from a New York City analyst internship that was going to be the next summer. So I interviewed with the rep, who I discovered would be my manager while working at the startup, and I interviewed with the CEO. We really hit it off, and I landed the position. And so next thing I knew, I was off and away from New York to California for the internship that would change my life. So what was it like actually interning at a startup? Kind of break this down into the pros and cons of interning at a startup. I guess I'll start with one of the biggest pros of interning at a startup, which is accelerated learning. So in internships and many other companies, interns really aren't given real work. This is because a lot of business processes for larger, more established companies are much too sensitive for an intern to be able to touch. But at a startup, you'll likely be doing something that you are definitely not qualified for, like whatsoever. So the growth potential here is huge. For example, on maybe my third week there, I was starting to get comfortable working at the startup. I was already working maybe 50 hours per week. I was getting pretty close with my manager, and I am out of the office about to get ready to talk to some customers when I get a call from our CEO. And I answer it and I say, "Hey, how's it going?" And he said, "It's pretty good. I have some news." And I say, "What's up?" And he says, "Your manager has left the company. We're gonna need you to step up." Now, I was 20 years old. This startup, I was maybe the 13th hire. So we had the 3 founders. There was a team of developers. There was my manager and myself, one other woman that I was becoming friends with. And then we had a remote team in the Philippines who would help, answer calls and some other things as well. I went through all of the stages of grief that day. I was in denial. I was angry and upset with her. I was trying to bargain, what can I do to make her come back? Because part of her responsibilities were, managing that remote team in the Philippines. And I discovered that that's something that I would have to be doing. And I was not ready for it. And it's odd because I always thought that I was a very confident person. I was very confident in my skills and I'd always excelled in school, but this was different because I knew that I was already stretched pretty thin. And I still didn't really know what was going on. I still didn't really know what I was supposed to be doing. And now I had to lead this remote team in the Philippines. Now I had to really step up and take this whole portion of the company operations. And again, like definitely not qualified to be doing any of it. And yet I had to do it. And, you know, I was working maybe upwards of 70 hours per week as time went on. But I very quickly went from being the one asking questions to being the one answering questions. And that transformation was huge. And it happened like this because it needed to, because we were a startup and we had to survive. So fantastic learning opportunity here. So our first con at working a startup is the lack of training. Usually at larger companies, there's a pretty comprehensive training program that interns go in the beginning of their internship, but many startups just don't have the time or the resources to dedicate to a training program, which means that more often than not, you're usually left to figure things out by yourself, which means that there can be a very steep learning curve. And this can be really frustrating. Again, like if you don't really know exactly what you should be doing, you don't really know how you should be doing it, that can be pretty rough. And I really don't think that can be understated because I feel like a lot of times as students, you know, we really think that we want to take on the world and we can, but I'd say it's not really until you kind of go through that when you realize that maybe it's for you and maybe it's not. For me, luckily I was able to, but again, there was a period of time where I really didn't think I was going to make it. Like I was convinced that I was going to fail, which meant that the company would fail, which meant that like everyone there that I had made friends with were all going to lose their jobs. You know, like that's how nervous I was for this work. Another pro, however, is insane exposure. So at many startups, you'll have direct exposure to either your senior leadership or your founding team. This is something that's pretty unheard of for, larger traditional companies. And this is fantastic for learning to become a better leader or a better founder if you want to eventually go on to start your own business. Especially after my manager had left the company, I worked so closely with our CEO, and I learned a lot from him. I learned how he chose to motivate his team members when things weren't going so well. I learned how he approached firing. I learned how he approached hiring. I learned what a lot of his, motivations and priorities were during his time as a leader. And that had a huge effect on me, even now as I'm attempting to start my own company and thinking about, okay, where does the future go? What does the future look like? A lot of that was drawn from the learnings that I took from my time being exposed directly to him as an intern. One con, though, is more often than not, you won't be having any direct supervision. As much as I say that I worked closely with my manager or closely with the CEO, if you actually look at it, I didn't spend a lot of time directly from them. It's not like I could really ask a lot of questions. It was more doing 98% of it myself and then going to them for the 2% that I really had no idea what to do. So, if you're looking for an experience where you're, really closely being mentored by a manager and can be at their hip and ask them all sorts of questions and learn directly from them all the time, being in a startup might not be the best place for you because there are a lot of times where you'll be kind of left alone to fend for yourself and to do what you can, by yourself. Another pro, though, is the ability to make an impact. If you return a year after a traditional internship, you'll probably not be able to see any of the work that you actually did. It's a drop in the water. Versus I can still see to this day the impact that I had on the startup that I interned at a couple of years ago. Just because, again, when you're entering something so early, when the work that you do is real work, it has a lasting impact. So if you're really looking for a way to meaningfully spend your summer, I would really recommend interning in a startup. And the last con that I want to talk about is that usually startups don't pay as well. While some startups can obviously pay more than others, usually they're pretty tightly strapped for cash. And so while you can see these like really kind of big, sexy internship offers from the bigger companies that provide a lot of dough, startups usually can't pay nearly as much. And you really shouldn't expect to have any equity as an intern as well. So if you're really looking to make a ton of money during your internship, startups might not be for you. But ultimately, I can realistically say that interning in a startup has changed my life. I think that, once a maker, always a maker. And there's no way that I would be starting a company right now if not for that experience and being able to learn as much as I did at that point. And I will say too, returning to school after that summer internship at a startup, I knew that I was far ahead from many of my peers in terms of professional and career and personal development. Having gone through that at times nightmare of an experience, but having learned so much from it. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, I really appreciate a thumbs up and subscribe. It really helps a lot. And if you have any questions about interning at a startup, or if you would like to see more videos about internships at startups in the future, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. And I interviewed with the CEO. What am I even saying?